Thanks for joining me. Today I'm making another economical vintage recipe. This is sweet corn soup and it's taken from Modern Cookery Illustrated, which came out in 1936. For this recipe you'll need 1 tin of sweet corn, doesn't tell us how big, 1 medium onion, 1.5 pints of milk, a small teaspoon of salt and a good sprinkling of white pepper, 2 ounces of butter or margarine, I'm using butter, and 1 ounce of flour. So that's 5 cheap main ingredients plus salt and pepper, and that's all that's in it. There's not a lot of preparation required, but you do have to peel and then grate the onion, which is a bit of a faff. I am crying so much at this stage. Ooh, this really makes you want to cry. If you have a food processor with a grater attachment, I recommend using it. Oh, still crying. And I've got a bit left, so I'm just going to chop it up. Given that we're going to blend all this anyway, I think might have just been better chopping it up very, very small from the beginning. I am crying so much. Yeah, maybe if you're going to do this, just chop the onion up very fine. Sure, you'll probably cry less. The recipe calls for a double saucepan, but I don't have one, so I've got a large Pyrex bowl over a saucepan, and I'll just put water in the bottom of that, and it will have to do. So into the bowl I'm putting the chopped and grated onion, which made me cry. Waste not, want not, every little bit, because I suffered over that. And then next goes in the contents of the tin of sweet corn, followed by the small teaspoon of salt and the white pepper, and then lastly we put in the 1.5 pints of milk. Then we bring the water to the boil and simmer it for 20 minutes for all the flavours to infuse. And while that's doing its thing, it's time to, well, the recipe says rub the butter into the flour and make a smooth paste, but that seemed a bit awkward, so I melted the butter in the microwave and mixed that into the flour, and then I just stirred that up to make a smooth paste. So that's been cooking for 20 minutes now, and as you can see the butter's actually hardened with the flour to make a very stiff smooth paste, and you just stir that in. I was a bit worried this was going to turn out lumpy, but in fact I think it's just going to melt because it's just butter after all, and that mixture is quite warm now. So it's just a case of stirring it in. Does look a bit lumpy. See what's going to happen. Just stirring that in apparently until it thickens. Oh, it's starting to melt now. Yeah, it's disappearing. Well, some of it is. No, it is disappearing. Yeah, it's just getting smaller now. So all I have to do is wait for that to thicken, which it seemed extremely reluctant to do. Still very runny. So I turned the heat up a bit to see if that would thicken it up. It started thickening a bit, but not really. So I decided to change tactic, and I drained the water out of the pan and just tipped the whole mixture in. I thought I could get it hotter that way, and then the gluten in the flour would activate and it would actually thicken up. My concern was it was going to burn at the bottom of the pan, but I'd waited a long time, maybe 10 minutes, and it wasn't thickening. But as soon as I did this, it got to the temperature and it started to thicken. Now at this point the recipe says to push it through a coarse sieve, but I've got a blender, so I use that. If you have a stick blender you could use one of those too. And then I just put it back in the pan to see what it was like and gave it a little taste. I have to say it's not a very strongly flavoured soup. Maybe if I'd used a bigger tin of sweet corn it would have a stronger sweet corn flavour, so maybe you would want to do that. You can adjust the salt and pepper at this point as well. Anyway, there it is, sweet corn soup. It is actually quite nice. As I say, very delicately flavoured. It would make a good starter with something like a fish pie or something like that afterwards. Something not too strongly flavoured. But yeah, it is nutritious and tasty. The recipe says it serves 4. So I put it into these plastic containers and there's enough for 2 people in each container, so it does serve 4. I'm going to eat one later with my husband and I'm going to freeze the other one. I don't see why it shouldn't freeze. I think it'll probably freeze quite well. So there we are, sweet corn soup. If I was going to make any recommendations, I'd say use a bigger tin of sweet corn or maybe use 2, so it's slightly less bland, but still quite nice and very cheap. If you want the recipe, you'll find it in the description. If you make the soup, let me know what you think about it in the comments. Thanks for watching.